Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Articulate Journal. Before starting this journal, I'd already built a couple of proof of concepts. They explored different ideas. One, I experimented with different conversational interfaces. Another looked at architectural discovery. Others explored RAG, knowledge graphs and speech services. None of them became the system that you'll see throughout this journal, but they were valuable because they taught me something. Every prototype answered a few questions and raised even more. This journal begins after those early experiments. It isn't starting from a blank piece of paper. It's starting from a collection of ideas, observations and architectural questions that I now want to explore properly. One of the biggest questions started to emerge from all those experiments was this: am I building software that happens to use AI, or am I building something fundamentally different? I don't think I've got the complete answer yet, but I do think it's worth exploring. One principle you'll hear repeatedly throughout this journal is that I try to begin with a problem rather than the technology. I don't start by asking, should I use agents, should I use this framework, or what model should I call? Instead, what problem am I actually trying to solve? The technologies come later. When I began designing Articulate, I wasn't trying to build an AI native platform. I was trying to build something that could help architects discover, understand and reason about architecture. That problem led me down to some interesting paths. As I explored the different approaches, I kept finding myself facing the same architectural decision. I could build another deterministic workflow, or I could allow a language model to tackle the problem instead. At first, those decisions seemed isolated. A language model could interpret unstructured information more naturally than I could code. It could also ask follow-up questions instead of forcing users through a rigid sequence of screens. It could reason across incomplete information instead of expecting every input to fit into a predefined structure. In those situations, using an LLM wasn't simply more interesting, it often felt like a better architectural choice. The surprising part was it just kept happening, not once or twice, but across completely different parts of the system. As more of those decisions accumulated, I noticed something else changing. I was no longer thinking about AI as another integration. Instead, I found myself thinking about questions that as an architect I wouldn't normally ask, like how should prompts be versioned? How do I replace one model with another without affecting the rest of the architecture? How do I know whether a newer model is actually producing better outcomes? How do I detect when behaviour starts to drift? And how should intelligent behaviour be evaluated? How could I observe and govern reasoning in production? These weren't implementation details, they were architectural concerns. That was an important shift. I wasn't yet concluding that Articulate was AI native, but I was beginning to suspect that intelligence deserved much greater architectural significance than I originally expected. This journal is, in many ways, an exploration into that idea. Over the past few years, almost lots of products on the market have become AI powered. Usually that meant by an existing application that's been enhanced with a language model. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. In many cases, it's exactly the right architectural decision. The application remains fundamentally the same. AI simply makes one part of it better. But I'm increasingly interested in a different question. What happens when intelligence is no longer just another feature? What happens when it starts to influence the architecture itself? That's the distinction I currently make. An AI-powered application uses AI. An AI-native application is designed around intelligence as one of its architectural capabilities. Whether Articulate truly deserves that label is something I expect this journal to test rather than to simply assume. If intelligence is becoming architecturally significant, then it begins to introduce capabilities that traditional software rarely considers. The runtime may need to understand intent, build and maintain context, retrieve relevant knowledge, reason across incomplete information, plan work, invoke tools, evaluate confidence, and collaborate with people. Those capabilities don't replace traditional architecture engineering. The system needs APIs, persistence, security, messaging, reliability, and observability. The difference is that intelligence begins to sit alongside those capabilities rather than on top. That's a very different way of thinking about architecture. Another term that keeps constantly appearing is agentic systems. And although these two ideas are related, I don't actually think they're the same. Agentic systems describe one way of organising intelligent behaviour. An AI native system may contain one agent, many specialised agents, or perhaps no explicit agents at all. The number of agents isn't what interests me. The architectural question is much simpler. Which responsibilities belong to intelligence and which remain deterministic? That's the question I want to explore throughout this project. I'll return to agents later in the series when I've established enough architectural foundations to discuss them properly. Articulate isn't intended to use AI simply because AI is fashionable. Every significant architectural decision should solve a real problem. If a deterministic solution is simpler, more reliable, and easier to understand, that's probably the right choice. But where the problem involves interpretation, uncertainty, incomplete knowledge, or architectural reasoning, my early experiments consistently suggested that intelligent offered a better architectural approach. Whether that observation continues to hold true is something this journal will test openly. Some ideas may survive, others may not. The important thing is that the architectural reasoning remains visible. If intelligence really is becoming an architectural capability, then it raises an entirely new set of questions. What is context? What is memory? Where should knowledge live? How should reasoning be coordinated? And how should long-running work be managed? How do humans remain part of that important decisions? And how do we evaluate intelligent behaviour? Those questions don't have obvious answers right now. They're exactly the questions I want to investigate as Articulate evolves. So rather than treating AI native architecture as a conclusion, I would like to treat it as a hypothesis, one that I'll explore further throughout the rest of this journal.